So welcome everybody for our next session in the Meet the Funders series. We're just waiting for our presenter, Nika Nour. So we'll give her a minute to join us, and here she is, right on schedule. How are you?
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Of course.
And again, thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Kevin Duggan. I'm the Director of Development at Games for Change. I've been involved with the organization for many years now. And my role is principally to help find the financial resources to help sustain the organization and the good work it does. And I've been moderating these sessions for the last couple of years, which have been great. I mean, really an interesting opportunity to hear from folks who in different ways are supporting the community of games and interactive media creators who have a goal of fostering social impact. And we've been able to hear both from the sort of nonprofit side and also from the investment community. So it's a really great opportunity. So these are relatively short sessions, half an hour. We like to leave plenty of room for people to ask questions. I encourage you to do that by using the chat function because it's such a short window. We haven't been doing video questions, but please feel free to add your question in the chat. I would say wait a little bit till after Nika has talked a little bit, and then feel free to do that. And also, I think Nika suggested that you could reach out to her via Twitter. Maybe you want to post your handle to the chat there?
Yeah, it's really tough. It's just at Nika. Actually, if I use the @ symbol here, it just auto-populates with my...
okay.
So I'll put a space. So don't put a space, but you are welcome to DM me on Twitter, and I will keep my tweet stick open until the conference is over. But hey, everyone.
Sounds good. So Nika, I'll just quickly say.
Okay, go ahead.
Nika is the Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association Foundation. That's a mouthful. The IGDA Foundation. And is a leading voice on diversity and inclusion in the video game industry. And you also operate as the Chief Strategy Officer of Liminal Esports. Interesting. And informatics PhD student at University of California, Irvine. So you may know Katie Salin, I would think.
Of course.
Yes. Anyway, so without further ado, Nika, you want to talk a little bit about the foundation and the good work that you're doing, and then we'll have a little conversation and get some questions.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Nika Nour. As Kevin stated with his lovely intro, I run the International Game Developers Association Foundation. I'm basically a very tired lady. We focus exclusively on broadening the representation and workforce of the video game industry through diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have had one of the most, everyone's had an intense pandemic year, but I'll say for us, we also went through figuring out and scoping how we support representation across many, many time zones with many, many partners over the last year. And as a culmination and a result of working with a lot of excellent partners, this year alone, we have re-granted over $250,000 to diverse developers seeking funding to get their ideas and bringing them through fruition using web monetization or alternative monetization methods in games. And on top of that, we are very excited and about to kick off our Diverse Developers Virtual Exchange Program. We love our acronyms over in the nonprofit sector, where we are bringing in 100 diverse aspiring game developers from around the world to go through and actually take a look at their career pipeline, whether they're looking for their first job in games or seeking to retain talent and stay in the workforce. And so we are doubling our scholarship program this year to support 100 people over a 6-week boot camp starting July 26th through the beginning of August. And we've brought in a lot of different supporters in that aspect as well. So really, the brass tacks of this is we're just here to make sure that everybody gets a fair shot, that the color of your skin, the gender that you identify with, the body that you're born in, isn't really a factor in whatever the hell it is you want to do. That's the brass tacks of it. Anyone who wants to make games should have the ability to at least go for it, without toxicity, without harassment, without, having people judge or push their own biases towards them. And it's really, that's the short end of it, Kevin. There's no two cents about it. As people know, though, it is an uphill climb in the video game industry. It's a little bit different than just technology. And there's still a long ways to go. Everything from destigmatizing video game play and use at home and with parents and cultures who still don't recognize a video game career as a suitable one, all the way to trying to demonstrate to companies that having a diverse workforce is actually good for the bottom line, is actually good for consumer play, is actually, a universe where we want people and young kids who've got controllers in their hands to see people who are of influence or making it or in leadership roles that look like them, that sound like them, that aren't, all the same monotonous, typical CEO that you see nowadays, which is fine. We love our typical CEOs, but we just like to broaden the representation. So that's the gym, Kevin. I don't know where you want to go from here, but we got a lot to talk about.
Wow, yes, there's a lot there to unpack. So I guess one question I have is, clearly you're really, I think, interesting when you're looking at this problem from every aspect. I mean, it's really
Right.
like the whole ball of wax. But, just sort of looking at some of the programs of the foundation, it seems like you've also made some very strategic choices about where you can have an impact. So one is you've targeted young people, right? I assume,
Right.
who maybe who have the aspiration to enter the game development industry. Then you're supporting people who are already in the industry in the sort of mid-careers.
Right.
And then also, I thought really interestingly, trying to create a pipeline for people who are not in the games industry, who may have been successful in other careers, but who really want to make that sort of lateral move.
Totally.
So can you talk about those? So it seems like those are 3 points where you really are looking to make a difference.
Yeah, look, we're not trying to boil the whole ocean, right? There are so many awesome nonprofits out there. There's a lot of people doing great due diligence with K through 12, focusing on middle school, focusing on, girls who code, Black girls code. So I focus on what we can, and we focus on adults, especially adults in the pandemic right now. One of the 3 points, we kind of segment them as the following. So there's scholars, there's students. Everybody wants to access students. It's not like any other industry. There's no clear path from the mailroom to the boardroom or from intern to chief of staff. And we're seeing really interesting trends with our current students. I'm laughing because I have, one side, I have half the students that we encounter in our scholarship and our applications, we have to almost beg people to apply to jobs. Really qualified individuals, really well-spoken, really well-educated, very talented. But we have to convince underrepresented students to actually apply to jobs because they don't think they're good enough. So there's a very serious case of imposter syndrome there. People being told their whole lives that they're not good enough, that they're not worth it, that they're not valued. It's heartbreaking. Then you have the other half of the components. And this is what we're seeing in our new kind of Gen Z trend, is people have this idea that, if I go on TikTok and hit 1 million followers, 2 million followers, then I'll just go become a CEO. There's kind of this idea that you can just be really popular and focus on your brand online and for everything, and then I'll magically just become a game programmer, which is not the case. You can become a content creator, you can do it on the side, but there's a method to the madness, right? We've got to find internships. We've got to get you under a good mentor. You've got to get under somebody who will sponsor you. So there's that latter aspect as well. Then we have our other program, Velocity, that you mentioned. Velocity is for people looking for their first entry point into games, but they're a little bit older. They're your elder millennials, your Gen Xers. We've even had folks in a demographic even older than that. And it's basically about almost like workforce retraining. Maybe you've been a software developer in the financial industry, but for people like us, like, game development wasn't even a bachelor's degree. It wasn't an option. Maybe we come from a household, especially children of immigrants, where parents really wanted you to become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. And so you've had to pave your own path and figure it out on your own. And so there are people that have always wanted a career in games, but let's be honest, it wasn't that long ago, and it's still pervasive that people think that gamers are, young teenage dudes brokering deals in the basement of their parents' house, right? And that's a very real reality where even women and underrepresented genders were told, like, game development isn't for you, games are not for you. And then, lastly, we've got a problem. We don't have enough diverse talent in the mid-level to the senior level career plans and the career paths. We're seeing a huge exodus of people leaving games, whether it's because of crunch or because they don't see upward mobility. And retention is a massive problem, especially since last year when there was a pivotal moment and game companies were touting and putting out press releases like, hey, we've got to get more diverse talent. Nika, do you know any? Well, my gosh, guess what? We don't, because we either haven't mentored them, we haven't sponsored them, or we burned them out because we didn't create the environments to actually retain that talent. They got snapped up by tech adjacent companies, and good for them. They're making 1.5 times, 2 times the amount of money they were making in games. So how do we support people in that upward mobility, in promotion, whether it's doing their own studios, becoming a vice president, figuring out and charting out a startup without funding? That's kind of the third element that we see really critical, especially right now in the field of UX and UI and gaming.
So, in the blurb for this session, it talks about resilience and persistence, and I think that's sort of what you were just touching on. Particularly during the pandemic, I mean, we've seen this writ large across American society, people rethinking who they are, what they do, what their relationship to work is. It's been an opportunity for that. And it sounds like what you're saying, that in the games industry, that there may be a little bit of a shakeout here. People who are just not, who really want to now look for something else, or they're tired, or they feel ground down by it.
Right.
So how do your programs really directly address that, sort of helping people become resilient and persistent and really stake their claim in the industry? I mean, I assume the scholarships come with some kind of stipend or financial support, or how does it work?
So all of our programs, we give out, thanks to the support of our sponsors. GDC gives us all-inclusive passes. Those are like $1,000 each. We have historically also re-granted funds to diverse developers seeking prototypes. We're about to do a whole game jam, and that's a whole other announcement that's coming out with cash prizing. But when it comes down to the persistence and the resilience, I won't mince my words. I hope that this foundation doesn't have to exist anymore. We really we're trying to work ourselves out of a job here. We want to get to a point where people they don't have to try to increase representation. It's just happening. But I don't mince words with our grantees, and I see that there's actually a grantee in the audience, a former grantee, and they could probably let you know in the chat. It's going to be harder. I tell everybody straight up, it's going to be more difficult for you. Like, you are going to, if you are a person from a different background that isn't, the typical gamer bro, it is going to be so much harder for you. Mobility is going to be there. You're going to have to bite your tongue if you're working in a large corporation many, many times. HR isn't always going to be your friend, nor is it depending on what state or what country you're in, nor is it probably it might not ever be your friend. And so but if you have a passion, if you believe in a purpose bigger than your ego and bigger than yourselves, that's the drive that's going to push you forward. It's not about, hi, I am this marginalized individual or talent from an underrepresented community that's going to break the glass ceiling. Like, no, let's remove that ego. What's the game you want to create? What's the business you want to perform in? What open world, what product, what experience are you putting in the hands of millions of consumers? And when you focus on less about what, like, oh, these are my circumstances and how am I gonna get through it, and more towards the mission and the focus of like what your purpose is going to be, that's where the beautiful innovation, the attitude, that's where we see a shift. Because it doesn't matter if you're even from an underrepresented community or not, or what industry you're in. Hustle, any type of dream you have, any type of ambition you've got. Hustle is a thing that just has to happen. I still have to do, I do it all the time. I still have to. I hustle nonstop. I hustle after companies. I try to prove to them like, hey, why don't we do a fund to support this underrepresented community and give out funding for them to get to their dreams. I look for pipelines and barriers and where the foundation can actually break down those roadblocks. It doesn't matter who you are. Those iconic, Hallmark movie scenes where like she walks into a VC's office and then pitches her idea and gets $5 million. That's not an everyday moment. And it takes 100 people to say no before you get a yes. But it's the question of whether our talent and our grantees are willing to knock on 100 doors. Do they believe in their product? Do they believe in their business? Do they believe in their focus? Is it bigger than them? And that's where you're going to see success.
Nika, in your initial comments, you talked about the 100 developers, young developers from around the world that you were bringing together, I guess, through the scholarship program.
Right.
So it is the International Game Developers Association Foundation. So, but is this the first time that you've reached out internationally in that way? Is it scaled up in some way? Tell me about how you do this internationally, which seems like a really incredible challenge.
It is.
Across all those cultures.
We basically never sleep due to the time zones. The way it works is that we used to run these as in-person programs. We would fly people, book hotel rooms at a much smaller scale to the Game Developers Conference. When the Game Developers Conference was canceled and we had already paid for hotels and flights, but a lot of sponsors had to pull, and rightfully so. We had a choice. We could say, hey, let's hope things work out this year and roll everybody over to the next year. Or, if the foundation isn't going to survive a pandemic year like many other nonprofits and small businesses, then, do we leave these 50 people, these 40, 50 people just high and dry? And I remember graduating in the 2008 economy. I remember having no shot. I remember working for free for 9 months. I still remember my first paycheck was a $500 a week stipend. Which was nuts in a very expensive city. So I looked to our team and I said, if this is our last year, let's move to a virtual space. Let's get these people jobs. I mean, it's like, let's do something with ourselves. And as a response, a lot of companies really liked the effort. A lot of people became really passionate about it. We had mentors pulling in from all over the world, different companies. And due to repitching this program, this virtual capacity, instead of doing a 1 week in-person boot camp, turning it into a 6-week virtual experience with building a community, workforce retraining, resume reviews, portfolio reviews, bringing in all sorts of veterans from the industry and luminaries to come talk in a locked, closed session. We ended up getting the ability to do it again and double the amount of people that we were going to support. And between our Diverse Developers Fund programs powered by Grant for the Web and our existing program, our virtual exchange, we will have helped more people than the amount of scholars we awarded in the last 3 years combined.
So it sounds like your move to virtual actually may have preceded the pandemic, but whether or not, Games for Change has also experienced the value in or the potential of virtual spaces for the work that we do. And I'll also just quickly mention that another real resource for thinking and working internationally has been the U.S. State Department. And Josh Shen from the State Department is one of our speakers this year at the festival. And Games for Change, what's that?
He's a good dude.
Indeed. And and has been really helpful in some of the efforts that Games for Change has been doing in terms of expanding our reach internationally. Somebody noted, Erica noted, great to hear web monetization mentioned. And I think I did hear that you mentioned it. It kind of went by real quick. What web monetization? What does that mean?
Yeah, so part of one of our part of one of the successes kind of coming out of this year is we partnered with Grant for the Web to actually re-grant over $250,000 to diverse developers seeking funding. And part of this is, I don't know if, I mean, of course people here know this is a Games for Change audience, right? But we were able to identify last year that another part of this pipeline, this problem, is that a lot of indie diverse developers seeking to create their own studios, create their own games, especially in countries where Activision Blizzard isn't in their backyard, like PAX West isn't in every country. And so how do we support diverse developers in countries and regions that want to build their own games, build their own products, and actually mobilize their own video game economy in places where we don't normally see? And so we partnered with Grant for the Web so that the diverse devs prototype. And I think people know this, but a lot of publishers these days, they don't just like look at a pitch deck and give you funding. A lot of people want nearly fully playable demos. And it takes time and money to create playable demos. Money and time that a lot of people don't have. A lot of people are trying to get roofs over their heads. We're working with developers that literally have access to electricity 50% of the time, spotty internet connections in various economies. We're working with awesome places in Zimbabwe and Nigeria. And we have to remember that being from North America, Europe, there's a gift in terms of like, we don't realize the way currencies work elsewhere. And that the fact that if we can actually support alternative monetization methods in gaming, in various underrepresented regions of the world, we can actually open up access and support creators more than ever. And I tell our grantees this, especially from the North American European delegation, that it is such a gift to be able to go to your computer and just turn it on and have access to whatever, not even think about your data, and some people I know have to think about the data, but not think about access to connectivity. And so we are hoping, and we are working with Grant for the Web to also be able to put that a little bit of power back in the creators. A lot of I don't know if people know this, but a lot of independent developers, by the time they even get their prototype done or phase one of their game done, they're so burned out, they just sell all of their intellectual property for pennies just to make rent. And when we saw these stories, I said, how do we get to a place where people can continue to create without having to just sell everything for pennies on the dollar? And how can people actually take their own products all the way to fruition? Because game development is expensive and it requires a lot of time. It is not typical like the apps you see in Silicon Valley or down in LA where people can dream whatever and create whatever. It takes time and money to put together a good game. And I want to see more diverse experiences. And the way to do that is through funding and a little bit of hope. Just a little bit.
So, and I think you're addressing Mia's question, which is really about the barriers and obstacles on a regional or geography basis. So I'm sure a lot of folks in our audience would want to know, how do they get access to part of the funding that you've been providing? And without going into detail about the application process, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the criteria or how they can get more information. Is there a timeline? Is there a deadline? Things like that.
Yeah. So our funding for the prototype program is already all distributed and dispersed, as well as our academic scholarships under that program. We are going to run a game jam with cash prizing, and we'll put out a press release on that in the upcoming weeks. I think our team is literally meeting as we speak about it to get together a deadline. So we'll push that out, and of course we'll follow up with the Games for Change conference, because we would obviously, our goal is to put funds and cash in the pockets of diverse developers that are looking to create, build, and pay rent. I think that's really important, especially these days. And then when it comes to our future programming, we will have a virtual summit August 12th, 13th, which will showcase the talent of all the diverse devs we've been working with, not just from the prototype fund, but also our virtual exchange program, which will include the 100 awesome, excellent, talented individuals from all three walks of life and points we talked about today.
So the fund was a one-time opportunity. It's not an annual.
It may be. We ran it for the first time this year so that we can actually see, just like any new program, you want to make sure it works. If a program doesn't work, we're not gonna do it again. But that's how it goes. The IGDA Foundation is very intentional about not recreating things for the purposes of recreating things. We don't put out press releases for the sake of putting out press releases. We are really, really intentional. And if we're not perfect, so if something we're doing isn't working, we change it, we fix it. If it does, we re-up it. So I make no promises until I can.
All right. And I see that Erica posted a link in the chat for those who want to follow up and learn more about web monetization. So we just have a couple minutes left. So clearly there's this other role, which is the advocacy role in working with industry. So how do you go about that? I mean, how do you make the case? How do you get access? How do you make the case? How are you persuasive?
How am I? Well, Kevin, how am I persuasive?
I've learned how you
wit, guile, and charm, Kevin.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
No. How do we talk to industry about diversity, equity, and inclusion? So the way I tell people, every executive director, every leader of every nonprofit is different. We're not the diversity police. That's not where we're at today. It's all about bringing individuals and leaders and companies to the table, having a meaningful discussion while holding their feet to the fire on action items and deliverables. We don't do pretty press releases. We don't just shove out tweets without action. And it's about being very present and very intentional, but it also requires a lot of patience. There's a lot of awesome people in these companies that want to support. And as we know that if a company doesn't start a company with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind, it's so much harder to go back and fix it. Think about any small business. If you put together tax filing, or if you want to change the name of your business, you want to get it right from the beginning. And if you don't, unraveling and unwinding time takes a lot of effort. So we build coalitions, we talk to these companies, and again, in the face of the pandemic, when everyone is at home trying to feed their kids and do their jobs and adjust to Zoom, it's all about just being persistent, being resilient. I can't tell you how many emails I fired off. I think last year we spoke with over 100 to 150 studios. It's about charming people through this little box here and try to create a personal interaction so that they follow through, that they want to fund individuals. And it's about making it really, really easy for people to get involved. And so we provide these very actionable items for people to get involved, whether it's through becoming a mentor, doing a webinar with us, sponsoring our kids some more so we can invite more than 100 people next year. We can support 150 people. And it's especially in a time where, virtual is a pain in the ass. This is also the most accessible way that we can support people globally. We are reaching countries, nations, and people with ADA needs that would have never been able to go to GDC before, would have never had a chance at a job in the games industry. And I think that's a beautiful thing, is building this community and building it very, very safely. building it so there's no harassment, there's no trauma, just really ensuring that we are also keeping the mental health of our grantees in mind.
And I think that's a perfect moment to conclude our session. So Nika, thank you so much for your time and for all that you are doing. And again, I want to encourage people who want to reach out to you. They can do so through Twitter.
Twitter's fine.
At Nika.
Yeah.
And also then go to the IGDA Foundation website and learn more there about.
I'll type in my email. Let it loose.
All right.
Send me your emails.
Why
I'm
not?
probably asking for trouble, but it's okay.
All right. So there it is. And again, thank you so much. And I want to encourage people to come to our next session and the other Meet the Funder sessions throughout the festival. All right. Bye.
Bye.